Hello and welcome to The Right Idea, where we discuss the people, policy, and politics that drive Texas. I'm your host, Brian Phillips. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And with me, as always, is our Chief of Research, Derek Cohen. Derek, I think I counted correctly. I think I added all up. I think we're in week 72 of the Texas legislature. Does it feel like that?
Really? Not really. I mean, still in the casual part. I think it can't be more than week 60.
There's a lot of people that are saying that not a lot's going on. I mean, I have a little pushback about that. And look, if you're, following this stuff every day, it does feel like there's like a new huge announcement or new thing every day. Beyonce acknowledgments aside, there does feel like there's a lot going on, or at least getting ready to move.
Well, and I will say there is something to that whole, a lot of folks rightly point out that about the 30 or 60 day moratorium, however you slice it. I always say, if you can get 100 people to agree with you, there's a real easy fix for that.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Actually, we've seen some of those actually have been filed. So
yeah,
those always tend to be like a pie in the sky dream. And then, we're going to get to ask Jason, what would he do if he had to get to work immediately? And, he's the kind of guy that likes to have his coffee in the morning.
Yeah,
so,
for the first
maybe he still
days.
wants those 60 days. Who knows? But we'll get to that. We'll get to
our guest, the Honorable Jason Isaac. He's the founder and CEO of the American Energy Institute. I was going to say initiative, the American Energy Institute. We will get to you and talk to you about all things energy, but I wanted to bring you in here on a couple of things. First, we always like to start with a little something fun at the beginning, a little hot take. And if you've noticed, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but Elon Musk, anytime he does anything MAGA or anything, anything not dealing with rockets, he's always wearing his MAGA hat. And I've noticed that, he goes into the Oval Office and he'll do a press conference with his MAGA hat on. And today he was literally at a cabinet secretary's report meeting wearing his MAGA hat, So anytime he gets, with the president's acknowledgement, and, the president loves it. So I'll ask you, if Trump lets Elon wear a hat at work, is it time? Should it be the trend that at all workplaces we're allowed to wear hats?
I might just be the old fuddy-duddy on this one, but we're in a brave new world. We all saw RFK Jr. during his hearing for HHS Secretary pop a Zinn in. I shouldn't assume Zinn. It could have been a Rogue. It could have been any number of smokeless tobacco pouches.
I missed that.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
It was made quite the rounds on the internet. So, but I have
wait, that gets me back to, remember when Scalia smoked a pipe during his confirmation? Do y'all remember that picture?
No.
Yeah, Scalia smoked a pipe at his confirmation hearing in the Senate office.
Great.
So there you go.
And he got confirmed. What does that tell you?
Yeah, all right. Hats
Nicotine causes good things to happen.
Jason, hats?
Yeah, I'm kind of a purist on this. I don't know if the hats are appropriate. Some people why are you wearing a hat indoors? Like you just
right.
Cowboy hats like indoors just drive some people crazy, and I get that. But I'm kind of a purist. When I served in the Texas House, we met one Sunday afternoon, and I wore my shirt and tie and jacket and jeans. And I felt bad. I felt bad that I was wearing jeans on the House floor. I only did it once. I was like, I just can't do this.
It wasn't the jeans. It was the Crocs, actually. It was the
it was the Vans. The Vans. Yeah, my black and white checkered Vans. Those were a big hit, and they were super comfortable. And I'm a big fan of Vans.
I don't think it was the Crocs. It was they had socks on under it.
Socks and Crocs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, my Birkenstocks and socks. Yes. Yeah. I just finished mowing the lawn. I had to come in, take the shorts off.
Birkenstocks and Crocs and your locks and the socks. So that's that two no's then, Derek?
There's our Dr. Seuss for the day.
Bad day to be a garage beer when Jason's in the vicinity.
So I guess if you're Elon Musk, you can get away with wearing a hat in the Oval Office. But the rest
did
of
you
us...
see the new hats, though? Trump was right about everything. He pulled those out yesterday during a conference or some media hit, and he was handing them out to the media. And wait, can you guys take these? Are you allowed to take these? He didn't know the ethics rules.
And only the Breitbart guy was like, yes.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah. It's like, well, yeah.
All right, so we'll get to Jason in just a second, but that's funny. My favorite part of the show is our shameless plug. If you're not subscribed to our newsletter, The Post, it's our weekly newsletter that comes out. It's kind of a hodgepodge of everything we're working on here at TPPF, but also the top news of the day. We always have some fun Texas stuff. If you're not subscribed, go to texaspolicy.com/thepost and subscribe today. Okay, let's get to the top news of the day, which unfortunately is not about energy and it's not about the grid, but it is about school choice. So we are fulfilling our contractual obligation here. But we now officially have, if you're counting, 77 votes for HB3, which is the school choice bill. There are 75 co-authors. The chairman of the Education Committee, Brad Buckley, has announced there are 75 co-authors. I guess it's just you don't have to tell us about the way this works, but the chairman isn't technically an author of the bill, and then the speaker never co-authors bills either. So, but counting the two of them who have said they're supportive, that gets the school choice supporters to 77 votes in the House, which is historic. Derek, hot take on that history?
Well, my hot take, and now again, granted, I did not have the advantage of school choice, but I can tell you that half of 150 is 75. And now write this down because you're going to need to show your work. 77 is greater than 75.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, mathlete.
Yeah, I know.
They say don't do math on camera.
Yeah,
but...
you know what? But when you're this good, when you're a product of Toledo public school system, you can get out there and flex like this. No. Look, we're being flip about it, but obviously this is a watershed event. You know, the fact that not only do we have a speaker that is committed to it, but signaling. Not only I like it, but the votes are there. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's I don't think the votes are there. And he's like, well, here's the names.
Yeah.
Here's 77 names. What are you going to do about it now?
Right.
And so it's like the game's up, you know? And so, I mean, you're going to have, even on the right or probably more towards the center, you're going to have like probably 5 Republicans that are just, absolutely no on school choice. And, maybe they'll get a weekly appearance in the Dallas Morning News when they have more free time on their hands. But, as of right now, that's what the deal is the deal. And, pray that it doesn't get altered further.
So, Jason, over to you. You were
and I want to argue with you for a second because I do think this is about energy. It's the school choice movement is really about energy. You look at the last year, we have numbers available. There were 35 students that graduated with a certification, either in oil and gas, only one in oil and gas, and 34 in refining.
That doesn't sound like a lot.
I mean, there's like
it's less than 75.
Yeah, it's less than 75. There's 35. There's thousands of vacancies that are available. You look, over 90% of the schools don't offer programs that are really geared towards the oil and gas or the energy industry. It's HVAC, electrical, plumbing, welding, mechanical. Mm-hmm. Over 90% of the schools don't offer those programs, but over 90% of the students live within 30 miles of a school that does, whether that's another school district or a career and technical education facility like TSTC, or maybe some private institution that teaches mechanical, welding, plumbing, HVAC, these things that are really important, that are high-paying jobs. You get a certification in those fields, you're making $60,000. And so now this school choice, this scholarships for students, you could have students get, a scholarship to go to one of these trade schools while they're in high school.
Right.
And so they're graduating with a high school diploma and a workforce certification, making good money. It's going to have profound effects on the economic prosperity of Texas because people are going to be making a lot of money at a much earlier age. They're going to be buying homes in their 20s. That average age for home ownership has gone from 30 years old, is now at 38 years old is the average age of a home purchaser, a first-time home buyer now. That's terrible. We need to reverse that trend. School choice is going to lead to that trend reversing significantly, and because people are going to be making more money.
And the kicker, no debt. No, they're not coming out of college without $50,000, $60,000 or more in debt. Instead, they're making $70,000, $80,000 out of the trade school and then jumping right into a job that has high need right now. So that's a really good point. The first question I actually was going to ask is that I was going to remind people that you have been in the House for 4 terms. So why couldn't you get it done?
Seriously,
because I'm just not as good as my wife.
That's right. Yeah, okay, there we go.
He wanted that cushy school.
I was one of the, not in a majority at the time, one of those that actually supported the movement, supported education freedom, parental empowerment, and tried to work with Representative Ron Simmons at the time, one of my former colleagues. We were really kind of leading this effort. I was a joint author on one of the bills to push this, and of course, just completely trashed by the leftist money grabbers that want to keep everybody in a monopoly and in a failing system.
We need to get a clip of Kerry jumping in saying, "It's not a competition, Jason."
Yeah. But I win. Yeah.
Well, let's get him. So our guest is Jason Isaac. He was in the House for 4 terms. He is now the founder and CEO of the American Energy Institute, and of course was at TPPF for a long time and ran our Life Powered campaign. Very successful Life Powered campaign. In fact, grew it to be a national campaign and was routinely testifying before Congress and all those other things and run around the country country,
including Sheldon Whitehouse.
Yes, had the sparring,
favorite,
the green bling.
My little favorite. Who's now his wife is on the take of all this government money that's drying up. So but we'll focus on the policy.
If we have time, I want to get to your thoughts on Chris Wright too, because I know he's a friend of the foundation and a friend of yours. But the first question I really wanted to ask is Landman. Is that real or no? Because it's a great show, and I want it to be
really is,
real.
and I don't want to do too much of a spoiler alert, but there was this issue that happened at the end of episode 1, kind of a safety issue, and our older son, who spent last summer working in the oil field in Midland, had sent us a video very similar to what's happening in Landman, and my wife, Carrie, looks at me and she goes, "Is that real? Is that real? That can't happen. That can't." I mean, she started to panic. She's like, "There's no way he's going back because he wants to go back this summer, as is his younger brother, and work in the oil field." She's like, "There's no way I'm letting him go work in the field if that's real." It's absolutely not real.
Okay.
But we immediately called him to check and made him watch the episode as well, and we had a good laugh about it.
Well, I hope some of it's real because Derek, the big takedown he does on the windmills, I think was pretty.
There's some very factual information about all the concrete and how they'll never be carbon neutral, which is absolutely absurd. As I drink higher concentrations of CO2 than what's in the atmosphere, and y'all are safe. I'm not going to spontaneously combust.
Great.
But he does talk about just the absurdity behind some of these things that are so heavily subsidized and are just driving up the cost of electricity and making it less reliable.
But there are stuff that they definitely pull a lot from today in today's headlines. I saw a clip from Landman wherein this actor Jerry Jones actually plays the president of a football team. And I'm 90% sure that at least in real life there's something similar that going on. I think they're up in Denton or Plano or in that general area. But yeah, there's a football team.
I think he was successful at playing the owner of a football team because he didn't play general manager in that role.
There it is.
And I think that's
You do realize we'll never. We'll never get media rights to the Dallas Cowboys.
That's why their season was successful. Landman's. Unlike
there goes our our advertising revenue from the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, so
they'll never do Thunderstruck for us.
Get to a couple serious questions. One, Trump took office, and then it was just like the barrage of executive orders. I don't even know if I saw any that were related to energy or any of the Doge stuff that's going on, if they've hit the Department of Energy yet. But I just want to get your kind of thoughts on, but right out of the box. I mean, when Biden took office, in the first 10 to 14 days, there was an attack on American energy almost immediately, and then it just continued all the way through the administration until the point when they started to realize that, you couldn't sustain these high gas prices and things like that, which was about 3/4 of the way through the administration. So I'll ask you: are we officially past the Biden assault on energy development in America? Or is there a lot more?
There's still some things that are hanging around, like his banning of offshore drilling on the continental shelf. That's going to take something. Congress is going to have to do it on every place except for the Gulf of Mexico, because the Gulf of Mexico doesn't exist anymore. And when Biden banned offshore drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, and Trump says we're now called the Gulf of America, that eliminated that executive order. So it's just awesome because the courts have ruled that this Continental Shelf Act, the presidents do have the authority to ban that. And it would take congressional action to stop it, or you could just rename the Gulf to the Gulf of America, which I think is some next level chess being played to bring back energy dominance. We are seeing some incredible progress on the scaling back of all the money. There's millions, if billions of dollars that were being wasted on programs that had nothing to do with making energy more affordable, with improving environmental conditions, which we really can't do here in the U.S. because we're world leaders in environmental protection already. It's like we're number one. Are we going to get number one-er?
Yeah.
It's just, we've done incredible work. World leaders in clean air, number one in access to clean and safe drinking water. So we're starting to see some of those dollars being pulled back that were in these so-called environmental justice or DEI programs that are coming out. And so we're on the right path. There's still more work that needs to be done.
What's the first thing? Like if you were, advising the Trump administration or Chris Wright or whoever, if you were texting Chris, what is the first thing right now that's like the most imperative thing that America needs to do to get back on track?
Get rid of the endangerment finding. That was a 2009 ruling by the Environmental Protection Agency that gave them authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, CO2, things that are necessary for life on Earth. They get to call it a pollutant, which it is absolutely not. It's not one of the 6 criteria appropriate pollutants named in the EPA's Clean Air Act from the 70s. But they passed this endangerment finding. It was a rule. And so now my understanding is just this morning, Administrator Zeldin is saying that he is going to recommend to the president and to Congress to pull back and rescind the endangerment finding. Every single bit of climate religion that's in policy within the bureaucracies within the federal government and most of the policies within state governments are based on that endangerment finding. It could upend the complete environmental climate alarmist movement. And would be transformative into the cost and production of energy in this country. We would not be going the route of the United Kingdom and Germany that have the highest energy costs in the world, the highest electricity costs. They are deindustrializing before our eyes. And in some cases, they're just doubling down. The United Kingdom is like, yeah, we're going to keep going forward net zero. No, we just discovered this massive oil and gas field right off of our coast. No, we're not going to produce that. We're going to leave it in the ground to the detriment of the people in the United Kingdom.
Oh, well, I'm glad things are moving in that direction. Next time you see Larry Fink, you don't need to cut that out, Jefferson.
You see Larry Flint,
different. That's known in psychology as a Freudian slip.
Talking about someone getting.
But anyway, next time you see Larry Fink as well, feel free to let him know that we're hiring for interns. So.
Our friend and colleague Mark Mills talks a lot about the Inflation Reduction Act and about all the green stuff that is in there. Outside of the endangerment finding, how detrimental was that bill, and how imperative is it to roll back what's in that legislation?
Incredibly imperative, but it's awesome because you get rid of the endangerment finding and almost all that goes away regardless because there's no basis in which to do it. Like the $20 billion that the EPA just discovered in Citibank accounts that are going to organizations like those that Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's wife works for, that he's voted for some of these policies. That he's basically directing taxpayer dollars into his own family pockets, which is complete violation of American taxpayer dollars and our trust. But it's called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund in the Inflation Reduction Act. $20 billion. You get rid of the endangerment finding. Great. You don't need this greenhouse gas reduction fund. It's absolutely absurd based on science, facts, and math, and now reality for the economic or prosperity of Americans.
Hand that over to Doge and see what they can do with it.
Yeah, believe me, they'd love to give it back to the taxpayer. That's where you get a refund back to the taxpayer for all of these egregious abuses that we've seen.
Derek, I want to get to Texas in just a second, but let's talk about that in terms of what the Department of Energy is doing. Secretary Wright now has been confirmed, and he's on the job. Elon Musk is going department by department. What's the word out of D.C. in terms of how are they going to keep up with, Department of Education and USAID and Department of Ag and all these other departments that are coming out with announcements every day that we're doing the right thing and doing what they said they were going to do for the American people?
But I think they're going to try to keep up by putting up a scoreboard. And I saw a scoreboard a couple of days ago. The Department of Education is number 1 on the scoreboard for reducing waste, fraud, and abuse. I think the EPA was number 3 on that list. And so these administrators, they're going to start to want to compete with one another. You start putting up where their agency ranks, everyone's going to try to be number 1. So I think just the fact that there's a scoreboard of what these agencies are doing is absolutely incredible. I love that. EPA being 3rd on the list of eliminating the waste, fraud, and abuse programs is absolutely incredible. So I just think Department of Energy is doing phenomenal. Chris Wright, he hosted me for an event at Liberty Energy in Denver on November 11th. That same week, his company, Liberty Energy, joined the American Energy Institute. We're a trade organization that represents American energy producers that unabashedly support free markets, that make the connection between affordable and reliable energy to human flourishing. Chris had started a nonprofit called Bettering Human Lives to try to advocate for people in third world countries to get access to affordable and reliable energy because he knows directly the impact that it has to mankind. He studied nuclear energy at MIT. So he worked on geothermal. He was looking to do nuclear energy to power his oil and gas operations because electricity is just not readily available. And if we're going to produce more energy in the form of oil and gas and coal and nuclear, you need electricity to make the components to do it or to drive these engines. And so he recognizes the importance of doing that. I don't think there's a better advocate within the cabinet of someone that truly understands the value of affordable and reliable energy and opposes some of the market manipulation that's happening. So I couldn't be more excited for Chris that's leading the Department of Energy.
I love that scoreboard idea because you can't fix what you don't measure, right?
Yes.
That's what they say. So thinking about Texas, we've had a lot of fixes. We've actually a couple last sessions. They have addressed. We had hurricane. We had Winter Storm Uri, which caused all of the issues and really centered around the urgency of ensuring that the grid is reliable. And there have been some fixes over the last few legislative sessions. What's the sort of the landscape for legislation regarding energy right now?
And then, not to steal Jason's thunder, because this is definitely his portfolio, but for me, when looking at it, I'm cautiously optimistic. Obviously, we have the regulation that I'm gonna actually put a pin in for Jason to pull the pin out of going into effect in 2027. But don't
you set that up because I have no clue.
that was a puck thing, right?
Yeah.
So, but again, I don't want to go down. I don't want to do burnouts in his cul-de-sac, if you will. But I will say though, if you look at the general shift in the mentality that the legislature has, you still have people that are starting to come along and see the issues that having the unreliable sources on the grid presents us. And to the point where just a bill today was filed, I believe it was Senator Sparks, that had a subsidy inversion. Basically like, oh yeah, no, the feds will definitely subsidize your production. Nothing we can do about that. But nice subsidy you'd have there. It'd be the same if somebody proportionately collected it and redistributed it. Which, I mean, to be honest with you, that is the unreliability. It needs to get priced into the market somewhere, right? And the fact that we're basically bailing them out, paying them to actually put for free or to pay production onto the grid because they have nowhere else to put it, and they can still run out of profit from produced energy and a produced energy credit. It's insane to do it. And that's why we have, Jason, I believe you said 40% now? 40%?
47%. So Winter Storm Uri, 33% of our grid was what I fondly call unreliables. Wow. We're now at 47% of our installed capacity. And installed capacity is just a nameplate. Every generation facility has a nameplate capacity. Granted, wind and solar never live up to their nameplate. They just don't do it. Right. Natural gas and coal, sometimes they'll actually exceed their nameplate. Nuclear can exceed their nameplate. But when you look at the nameplate of installed capacity, wind, solar, and batteries, heavily subsidized batteries, that mind you last for seconds. They're used to maintain a frequency on the grid. So if you have an incredibly, a really sharp spike in demand and your generation hasn't ramped up yet, you can put batteries on the grid.
But it's a dump.
It happens, and they're done in seconds. And by that time, hopefully the natural gas generators have started spinning up a little faster. Hopefully. The coal generators, hopefully. Yeah, if not, they start tripping offline. And then you've got to do rolling outages. And this is what happened during Winter Storm Uri is we just didn't do rolling outages fast enough. You still would have had outages. Right. It wouldn't have been as bad as it was. But ERCOT, if they were on the scoreboard, they probably wouldn't be on the scoreboard. They'd be so low.
But that's the issue, though, is that you basically have this indifference is probably importing too much of the conversation, but you basically have an unwillingness for whatever reason to basically have what is essentially a firming return. Now we're getting there, but we're not there yet. But you do have, like I mentioned, Senator Sparks' bill and bills from others to really say, like, look, if the feds are going to stick their thumb on the scale of the way we run our electricity market in Texas, well, we're going to put our thumb under the scale on that same side. And a lot of people argue, oh, it's not a free market. But it's the same kind of question when we talked about, military spending. Chuck DeVore, colleague, is always fond of saying, like, is China going to sell us the ships we're going to use to fight them? And I find it the exact same way. It's like you can't presume a free market when there's such a anti-free market force there. But I want to pull out that pin about the puck thing for Jason, because I didn't want to take his thunder.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. The way it's in law right now is by January 1st, 2027, there's a reliability standard for variable sources of generation, wind and solar. The Public Utility Commission hasn't even begun to study it yet. But by January 1st, 2027, any generation that's built after that day, not the 47% of the grid, which will be 50% of the grid by then, at least, has no standard. And so what Senator Sparks is trying to do in one of his bills is saying, you know what, all generation should have to meet a reliability standard, and they should all do it by January 1st, 2027. And so he's essentially telling the Public Utility Commission to do this in his bill if it passes. That would essentially firm up the grid, allow ERCOT load managers to understand what electricity is going to be available and when it's going to be available. It also will help, and the offsetting the subsidies is a great idea because it does. It levels the playing field. And I've said let's charge a reliability fee equal to the subsidy, and then distribute that fee back to generators that meet peak demand times. Because you hear in the media, they'll always throw out these glorious numbers about how much electricity is being produced from wind and solar right now. But I always say, what about peak demand time?
Right.
Show me those peak demand times during the winter.
When we actually need it the most.
When lives depend on it. Because turning on lights is nice. Having warm water to take a bath or shower is nice. But you start losing refrigeration and you start losing heat in the winter, it becomes life or death. Your medicines, hospitals can't refrigerate medicines. People that need medicines refrigerated, you start losing refrigeration, your food starts spoiling, you get hungry really quick, but cold temperatures are 40 times more dangerous than warm temperatures. So people are worried about warming. Man, warming's been great. Life expectancy is longer. The deaths from weather-related events are down 99% over the last 100 years. But freezing deaths are on the rise in places in Europe. These are developed first world countries, Germany, the United Kingdom. People are freezing to death because they can't afford to heat their homes. So that's absolutely appalling.
So there have been some grid reforms over the last couple of sessions.
Yes.
And by all accounts, or by the outward looks, we haven't had any issues. Haven't had any issues last summer. The winter was the one that we were worried about, and we're getting through the winter. I mean, it's going to be 80 degrees on Saturday. So there you go. That was Texas winter, and we didn't seem to have any problems. I mean, obviously, I'm not watching it every day like you are, but it seems like we got through, and that maybe perhaps some of the reforms that we implemented are making the grid more secure. Where would you come down on that? Are we how would you grade that?
Yeah, because people since Winter Storm Uri, when I was here at the foundation, just every time it gets cold in Texas, I get media hits, and I've usually got about 5 or 6 media hits all over the country. Not in Texas. I mean, it's everywhere around. Like, oh, what's going to happen? Is the grid going to collapse again? And I say, no, it's not going to, because we put some reforms in place that basically has equipment on standby. So the Public Utility Commission is not letting coal and natural gas go down for maintenance when they would normally schedule maintenance during some of these more milder, warmer months. And so now they're not, and they're paying them to be on standby. It's like having a car follow you around in case yours breaks down. You can jump in this other car and go. That's essentially what we're doing.
But not the most efficient thing.
It's really kind of expensive. I mean, the Life Powered Project here, I just saw some of the research, $2.33 billion last year alone in paying equipment to stand by. Wow. That's in case the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining. And guess who those costs gets passed on to? They get passed on to the ratepayers.
Yeah,
in July 6, 2021, Governor Abbott put out a directive to the Public Utility Commission to allocate those reliability costs to the generation that are causing them. And he says, namely wind and solar. That still has not been done yet. 4 years later, and the reliability costs are not being placed on the generation that's causing that.
So in your analogy, would that be, making the car following you around more efficient, or maybe it's a moped instead of a car, just in case of emergencies, or is it actually making the car you're driving better?
It's making the car you're driving better, allowing it to go in for maintenance when it needs to go into maintenance. Because you look at the generation that we have in Texas, there's really over 700 plants. So you've got plenty of generation where you can take one off from time to time and go through a full maintenance, so it'll last its 40 to 50 year life expectancy. Wow. You've got to have where you can't retire generation early, because you invest in an asset for your mortgage for 30 years. You're going to pay that off for 30 years. You're not going to just I'm going to close my house. We're 20 years in, because you still have the 10 years left of payments to make on that house. But what you have some generators doing, they're virtue signaling. Oh, we're going to get rid of natural gas and coal generation and replace it with wind and solar. So there's stranded costs that they're leaving. There's also this investment in stuff that doesn't work, and they're passing it on to ratepayers because they get to. And so the Public Utility Commission really needs to come down and say, you know what, no more rate increases for you guys until you meet a reliability factor for all of your generation in the high 90s, because those costs are getting passed on to consumers. 25% increase in electricity over the last 4 years. I mean, this is just unaffordable. It's going to lead to deindustrialization, which is what's happening in Germany, the United Kingdom, and California.
Well, Jason brings up a good point about the virtue signaling, because I think that's one of the most pernicious things. Like, I don't know if you remember this, Jason. This was probably 8 months to a year ago at this point. But Austin ISD was celebrating how it just procured a fleet of electric buses, right? Now, I'm pretty sure, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, these buses themselves do not have windmills or solar panels on them.
No.
And in fact, I believe they are powered by the fleet that is owned by Austin Energy. And I believe Austin Energy is one of the largest plants in that portfolio is the Fayetteville coal plant.
Yes.
So in order to have, we need to burn.
They're literally rolling coal.
Yeah, they are rolling like what you could only hope to do, Jason.
I
You could
know,
only
my
hope
high
to do.
carbon lifestyle. I wish I could roll coal.
Yeah, but not as high carbon lifestyle as Austin
Not
ISD
at all,
though.
not at all.
But so yeah, but I say this facetiously, but like it's like that's just the utter insanity of it. To power these buses, we need to burn coal. And here's the thing.
That's green because they're electric. And that's what everybody says.
Yeah, so that's just one of the things where I'm just like, I don't know. Do you have any other examples where you've seen just the most preposterous hypocrisy in the space?
Yeah, the 40,000 kids working in the Congo in Chinese-owned and controlled mines that are between the ages of 4 and 13 might argue that those are green school buses, that they're helping mine the components that go into the batteries for those things. You know, the very base cost for electric generation, and this is what a lot of people use. Oh, electricity only costs $1.41 a gallon. That's a very base. We did research here at the foundation a couple of years ago and showed that it was really $17.33. You won't be surprised the numbers increased significantly per gallon equivalent for electric. But let's just use that very base one just for the cost of electricity, $1.41 a gallon. That's not including all the chargers. It's not including the upgrades and the infrastructure that you have to do, and that's how we get up to a much higher number. But Eanes ISD is buying propane buses. They're paying 50 cents a gallon equivalent for propane. That's fiduciary responsible. I mean, that's the kind of responsibility that we need in these government agencies that are using taxpayer dollars. They're not virtue signaling that they're buying school buses that cost 3 times as much as a propane school bus. So it's just complete hypocrisy, like you said, that they're doing this just so that they can virtue signal to their friends that, hey, all our school buses are electric. It just happened in Maine. You had a freezing temperatures in Maine with a fleet of electric school buses, and kids got stranded because the batteries died because the temperatures were cold, and no one could come and charge up the bus. So you talk about an astronomical cost to tow an electric school bus, which weighs thousands of pounds more. So you're bringing out a big, huge diesel-powered tow truck to tow these. The company that made these school buses,
not a green diesel-powered
not
tow
a
truck.
green diesel-powered truck at all. They talk about rolling coal. I mean, it's a beautiful sight to behold. But the companies that made these school buses are now bankrupt, so they can't get them repaired. I mean, there's just stories.
So in
we
Maine-
actually launched a website called evdisasters.com. There was just too many things to keep up with, so we aggregate all these stories about all the failures and bankruptcies for EVs around the world.
So in Maine, you can literally have a snowstorm, dump 6 feet of snow on the roads, and they'll have it cleaned up, and nobody gets stranded. You know, by 6 a.m., the roads will be completely fine. But you get on one of these buses, and that's what does it. That's how kids get stranded. It's not the 6 feet of snow on the road. It's the
your
EV
lesson
bus.
today is you're going to get halfway to school.
Oh my gosh! All right, well, let's see. I mean, I love polling, so I like to get into that a little bit. Would it shock either one of you that despite the reforms that we've had and despite the success really that the grid has had over this last year, and really not even really coming close? I mean, Abbott and others have, they put out their the charts and things like that, and say, look, we did a good job of keeping. I forget when you were here, I was much more knowledgeable about all of those terms and everything, but not getting close to essentially going over the limit in terms of how much we're producing. And so there's a lot of positive news. We've been through the summer, we've been through the winter and haven't had any issues, and yet we still poll this question, and a majority of Texans, 55%, still say that the Texas legislature hasn't done enough to secure the grid, or that they're worried or concerned about the grid. And that's not a red hat, blue hat thing. It is also a plurality, at least, of Republicans still believe that we haven't done enough. Does that surprise either one of you?
I guess it does surprise me a little bit that it's that high. They're right. And that's, I guess, good information to know that the polling shows that. But yeah, I guess I'm a little surprised because it just seems that usually these issues don't poll very well for people. There's still favorability, although it's dropping significantly for these variable sources of electric generation. Right. Would outpoll natural gas and coal. Those are reversing. But yeah, I guess I'm a little surprised, but pleased that the number is that high, because they're right. The grid is operating better, but we're paying more for less reliable generation, so our pocketbooks aren't faring better, and market reform truly needs to be done.
Exactly. And I would say, yes, and I am not surprised, but for that very same reason that they're right, is because I think they misdiagnosed the issue. Because, again, remember, the reason we got into this is because there's this idea that, nobody, again, until Doge and all that, nobody was really caring about like the actual outflow of subsidies. The outflow of subsidies have skewed our decentralized market so bad that we now actually have, and something that should have been a natural cost containment feature, to Jason's point, now is leading to, I wouldn't say record high rates, but much higher rates than even like more controlled and regulated markets would have, because there's that much of a thumb on the scale of the production. And so in doing so, I think that they're answering a general frustration, as opposed to, I strongly agree that we need a firming requirement by 2027.
Right.
That's not what they're answering. They're like, yeah, the grid doesn't seem to be working, or I'm still scared because what happened it was only 4 years ago and people died.
Yeah. And it doesn't help that the PUC doing their due diligence are, when it looks like things are going to be close, they do put out announcements, as they should. I mean, there's a responsible thing to do, but those announcements will fuel the fire that something's wrong.
I mentioned this because when we talked at a TPS about this, our friend of the show, Brad Johnson, what he calls EPT, ERCOT panic Twitter. And like he said, it's largely
EPX now.
Yeah, EPX. That's probably some stock symbol for some thing. But but essentially that's largely subsided, because the way that was is you would see the converging lines between expected production and expected demand, and they tighten up to within 1,000 megawatts or something in those lines, and then people would just absolutely lose their minds. And it turns out it was like beep, and then they just kind of drift off as the day turns into night. And so that was the issue, is that people fundamentally don't know what they're scared of or what they don't like or disapprove of, but they just know that like grid bad make me feel bad, therefore fix.
I would agree with that sentiment. I think that if the PUC and ERCOT, they are so focused on making sure everything's on and working, keep the grid on, keep it working, that they are over forecasting demand. And what that's leading to, and then they're paying generation for this standby.
Oh yeah,
and so
ancillary services
cost. There just seems to be no concern for cost whatsoever. Yeah. I heard someone from the PUC recently say that wind and solar are reducing the cost for electricity. Couldn't be further from the truth. And I've done a video here I think last year, 2 years ago.
Their electricity is very cheap to produce for them.
Yeah.
Now for all of us,
yes, and it is absolutely driving the cost up. I think what we're going to see here is probably, that 55% number may go up a little bit if you pulled it again in a month when people start getting their electricity bills from last month, because we had that cold spell. People were running their heat. They're going to be like some August, September Texas bills when people run their AC. You're going to see that here in March timeframe, and people are going to be furious.
So speaking of bills, like that segue, you did mention a bill by Senator Sparks. Jason, you're obviously watching this really closely. We're getting close to the filing deadline on legislation. Are there bills that we haven't mentioned or that kind of under the radar that you're looking at that would help move Texas along and make our grid more reliable or our energy more affordable, that either have been filed that you'd like to talk about, or any that have not, or good ideas?
So there's some good ideas that haven't been. Senator Sparks has got some great bills. 715, I think Senate Bill 715 and 714. Both of those bills will help firm up the grid, reduce the cost for electricity in the state, which is a great thing for the consumers and ratepayers and industry alike. There's some ideas that are floating around. Do we need to split the market? Do we need to go into two markets and because we're in an energy-only market right now, do we need to have a reliable energy-only market where your thermal generation, really anybody could play in that market, but they're going to have to guarantee availability. And what their price cap would be is the current price cap that we see now, $5,000 a kilowatt hour. They could play in that market if they can meet reliability standards, or you have a renewable, and then you have it's like bifurcated. You have another market that's just renewables. They can play in this market, but their price cap's $20. So they're getting the $25 per megawatt hour subsidy, but they can only cap out at $20, which that you separate two forms of generation, one that works when we need it and then one that is dependent on the weather. And so that's an idea that's getting thrown around right now. Probably not going to see any movement on legislation this session, but hopefully some discussions. Do we really need to separate these two forms of generation? Because I think you do. And
is that the thing that could end up in like a study bill?
Yeah, it could potentially end up in a study bill, and you look at it and you come back and make these market reforms. And these typically take years to happen, but I think that's a really good idea that we need to seriously consider. Another idea is this customer regulated entity or customer regulated electricity, where you could say you kind of create a free trade zone. And you're going to have someone come in that says, I'm going to build generation for the participants that are in this free trade zone. It could be data centers, manufacturing facilities, but they don't connect to the grid. They just provide electricity to the people that are within this free trade zone, is the example that I'm using because we have some of those here in Texas. So you create new generation. So you could have companies that are in generation that already do it. It's like, hey man, no PUC regulations, no federal regulations. I'm going to come in there and I'm going to put in some generation. I'm going to provide electricity, or you could have some new market entrants. But that's one way to help meet the growing demand in Texas without impacting the grid. And it's a free market. So that's another idea that's being thrown around. Might see something like that filed this session.
Yeah.
Again, we're late in the game here now, whether or not these ideas become law or not. But I would love to see something done on that front because, again, it does create a free market. You could have a municipal utility district come in and say, you know what, we're going to operate a utility. Maybe they hire an existing generator to build it, but they're just serving people within their development district.
Yeah.
So just some ideas to help meet Texas growth, meet reliability and affordability, and put more generation on the grid.
We'll be in touch about the Wells Branch 1 and 2 nuclear power reactors.
I love it. Yeah. And you'll get calls and angry messages if we don't talk about nuclear, but nuclear is coming to Texas.
I was going to say, we're running long, but I actually need to talk about nuclear.
Yes, you do, because there were some angry people that were just really frustrated at the Texas Policy Summit last week.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody at the Lottery Commission that could throw a winning ticket over to a nuclear company, but we really need about $100 million investment into that. Texas is going to be the renaissance of nuclear energy, I believe, in the United States. There's already 3 companies that I know about: a small modular reactor in the Houston-Galveston area, molten salt reactor in Natura, in Abilene. They're partnered with Abilene Christian University. And just last night, I met a company called Reploy Power. I think it's Reploy. They're an Australian company. Their CEO just moved to the Central Texas area. They recognize the opportunity for
Is there
nuclear.
any legislation that needs to happen in order to
Senator
encourage
Parker's got a bill that would basically create this new nuclear regulatory office to kind of shepherd people through the regulatory process to speed it up. And then I think Chris Wright at the Department of Energy is going to be, again, an incredible advocate for affordable and reliable energy and helping reduce the overburdensome regulations that we see, because those are driving most of the cost and the reason why we're not expanding nuclear as it is. But it's very optimistic. The public perception has changed on nuclear.
My favorite stat that I heard at TPS was that more people have died installing solar panels than have died from radiation in America from nuclear.
The solar panels are
right,
killers.
We're going to jump into our 10-minute drill segment. I hope you'll stay with us and have some fun with this. It may relate to energy, or you're so good at your talking points, we'll probably end up talking about energy no matter what.
I'll bring it back.
He answers the questions he wants.
So bring it back. But thanks for being with us. It's super helpful, and as always, really good information to have you on, Jason. Appreciate that. All right, we're going to get into Survey Says. We talk about some polling that I find interesting. I don't know if y'all saw the 60-minute story, but about those ridiculous free speech codes that are going on in Europe and specifically in Germany. On the 60 Minutes interview, German officials said that their law means that you can be arrested. You can literally be arrested for insulting someone, including calling them an SOB online. So I don't know if you've been online recently.
Even if you repost it. I mean, this is insane. Yeah. It's like if you like it or repost it. I saw the interview of those 3 prosecutors.
I don't know if you've been online recently, but 90% of it is just people calling each other SOB. Yeah. So it's like everybody in Germany in jail. Like, what do they even use social media for? I think it means
James Quintero is about to get a visit from Interpol, and it's not going to be pleasant.
What's worse is they're in Germany.
No European vacations for the Quinteros. But the good news is here in America, while they claim that there's not censorship, 22% of U.S. voters, only 22% of voters agree with them that is not that is not censorship. 69% believe that it is censorship. 69 feels a little low. I don't know. I mean, not being able to call somebody a jerk or something, or I mean, again, nobody wants that. That's not what social media is for. But the fact is, somebody saying that you're a bad person or a jerk, or even criticizing you in a harsh kind of way. I think a lot of people would think that. I mean, more than 70% should be saying that is a violation of speech.
Well, I mean, we've said on this podcast before, and I think even as recently as last week, Europe's a dying continent, and it's because of. I would say it's not due to stuff like this, but it's from a rot that manifests like this and like it does in every other way. Mm-hmm. And look, this is not me telling another country how to run their affairs, but I bet if you even checked in with the German people, and this look, we can go to the political science of the value of a parliamentary system versus a first past the post system like we have, but that's probably a different show. But that being said, I don't even know, have they actually polled this among their people, because there's no way that this can be popular even in a parliamentary system where you can make a cohesive majority.
I wonder if releasing the results of that poll would be a violation of free speech, or would be subject to the speech code.
Checkmate, pollster nerds got you on that one. So
Oh, okay, but I will yes, but your comments on that and ask Jason. However, in the same poll of Americans, the quote was from the German officials: "Free speech needs boundaries. Without boundaries, a very small group of people can rely on endless freedom to say anything they want." They said that in a negative way. While everyone else is scared and intimidated. Excuse me. 61% of Americans agreed with that quote, that free speech needs boundaries because otherwise, with endless freedom to say whatever you want, you could intimidate and scare people.
Wow, I'm a big fan of personal responsibility, and if people want to keep their mouth closed, they should keep their mouth closed. I like the quote that talks about keeping your mouth closed and being thought an idiot, or opening it and removing all doubt.
Right.
I love the keyboard warriors because I get to see who they are in real life, because sometimes people will say some stupid stuff, and if they don't want to do that, then they can just back away from the keyboard. But that's kind of shocking that people think we need guardrails on speech.
The good news is, though, that of that, in that same poll, only 27% believe that it should be government who should set those boundaries. So I'm not sure if 61% say there should be boundaries, only 27% say it should come from government. I'm not sure who the boundary setters are then.
Well, as a person whose last name is Cohen, hearing the Germans talk about we should set limits on certain freedoms, maybe they just sit this one out.
Very true. Very true. All right, let's get into some lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I was we have not published this research here at TPPF yet, so I'm breaking some news here, but it will be out shortly.
Let me speak for the research apparatus. As you read this, imagine, and a watermark says draft across it.
But we'll get to, but we do talk a lot about taxpayer-funded lobbying. There's actually going to be a big hearing tomorrow in the Senate on taxpayer-funded lobbying, and more specifically, eliminating taxpayer-funded lobbying. We calculate all of that. We here at TPPF calculate how much local governments, or governments in general, spend how much of your tax dollars is spent on high-priced lobbyists in Austin that apparently do nothing more than just call their old buddies and go out to lunch and all that kind of stuff. $98 million was spent just last year on funding lobbyists, and that is up from $75 million in 2023. Derek, you obviously have seen the research and are inches away from approving it. What did you make of this new stat?
Well, first I have to put an asterisk, as much as
98 million,
because it's reported as a range. But this is nothing new. This is nothing new. We talked about this last week, and we've talked about it a million times before. This is one of the self-licking ice cream cones of the legislature. It's that bird that goes down that Homer tried to use to run the nuclear reactor when he put on all that weight and worked from home.
See, it all comes back to energy.
It does. Yes.
Totally on purpose, not because I just saw that Simpsons episode. But yeah, this is just one of the things that exists on inertia alone, is that money goes to hire lobbyists to fight for the ability to tax. That tax is then collected. That tax money then goes to hire more lobbyists to expand that further. And again, we talked, there is not a single actually, let me kick it to Jason. Jason, when you were in the legislature, if you ever had the mayor of Dripping Springs, even though perhaps that polity is a little bluer than you were, but if the mayor of Dripping Springs called you and you were talking to some schmo like me, you would walk out of that meeting with me and you would take that call, would you not?
Absolutely, yeah. And I did constantly. In front
of Derek.
With Derek, with the schmo right here. Yeah, I walked out of schmo meetings all the time. It's just crazy because you're right. The representatives and the senators take these calls not only from their constituents, but their elected officials who also have a constituency that they serve, and so they understand that importance. To do some CNN math, 98 million, there's 30 million people in Texas. You could just give everybody $3 million in the state of Texas and stop the taxpayer-funded lobbying. But that's CNN math. Don't quote me on that.
Your apostrophe's several places off, but
don't do math on camera.
That was Bloomberg.
Stick to 77's larger than 75.
I don't know why that clip sticks with me from when Bloomberg spent millions of dollars in the presidential race, and CNN was like, he could have spent $1 million per vote.
Yeah,
and I'm like, oh, you guys are missing some
definitely
comments.
some CNN math. But
regardless, it's millions of dollars, $100 million of our dollars are being used in most most cases against our best interest.
Right. The two arguments are, we need at the local level, we need this because, we need to get in touch with our local officials and plead our case. And to Derek's point, pick up the phone. I mean, the idea that some, county mayor or county council person, at a major city, could call a state rep and they would never get back to them about a, crucial issue in their state. It's just absurd. It just doesn't happen. I mean, where's the testimony from the mayor saying, Representative Johnson, I called you 17 times and you never called me back. That's just not a thing that exists. And so having to spend upwards of $98 million, as much as $98 million is absurd.
Easy way. It's the easy way out because they're going to say, well, I just don't have the time. Well, then why did you run for office?
What do you have time to do? If that's not the most important thing you're doing.
Especially some of these councils are getting paid. I mean, it's absurd. Like, I understand the whole volunteer. A lot of these city council members and school district trustees, they're unpaid positions. Well, why did you run for the position if you don't have the time to commit to it?
And
I know firsthand, believe me, serving in the legislature, I went broke doing it. But it was like my service mentality to give back. And then I got out, did 4 terms. I'm like, I'm done. I can't afford this anymore.
And the guy that you're trying to get in touch to, or, your state rep is in charge of billions of dollars that then get distributed into the districts and then across the state. If pick up the phone. It's like, what do you mean you don't have time? If you don't have time for that, then what exactly are you doing?
Yeah.
The other argument they say is that it's we don't have to get into this because we're running short on time. But I remiss if I didn't mention another one is say that it's a violation of freedom of speech, to which our colleague Chuck DeVore would say governments don't have freedom of speech, individuals do, so there should be no constitutional problem there.
Amen.
All right, the last thing, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well, Jason, is we always what to watch for, what's coming up, what's in the next few weeks. I may have stolen yours. I don't know if I did steal yours.
You always do.
I always steal yours. But we mentioned it before, but the filing deadline is a big one, especially for folks like TVPF and the activists that are out there. They're expecting certain legislation to happen. I mean, that's kind of that's one of those milestones that's like, you've been waiting 18 months to figure out if they were going to address your issue or pass a certain bill or what progress was going to be made on something. If you don't get in on the filing deadline, it's not the absolute last thing, right, Derek? But it's a very strong indication.
Well, again, I'm going to have to defer to Jason's expertise, but we're not probably the point yet. But if you're around the building on the filing deadline day or even a couple of days before, like, you're done. You're cooked.
Yeah.
There's some, and I do hope this persists, is there's a tradition of offices putting up signs saying that we're not receiving any visitors and hopefully having some memes and some funny entertainment with those signs. So I hope that persists. But again, if you're shopping for a bill author on the deadline day, you are a month too late.
You have to take your ID and through the mail slot prove that you're a constituent in order to get into the office.
Yes.
All right. So we'll let you think.
BFD, bill filing deadline's coming up March 13th or 14th. I know it's 60 days after the start of the session. You're right. If you're not in by then and it's a major piece, you're cooked.
So we'll give you the last word, Jason. So Derek, you're what to watch for?
My what to watch for is the memes on filing deadline day. I'm gonna go ahead.
Wow.
Since you're going filing deadline, I'm gonna just go yes, and I will give you the Price is Right answer of what you just said plus $1. So
I'm glad you did a lot of preparation for this segment. It's fantastic. I'm glad to see that you take it seriously.
I'd watch for said the guy who sends us show notes out 45 minutes before we got here.
Yeah. No, I think I'd watch for the hearing on school choice bill when that's done in the House Public Education Committee, because it's definitely something to watch for. The news stories around the state, if not the nation, will be focused on Texas. Tensions will be high. I just ask that people be patient, watch the process, be a high fact finder, learn about what's going on. Don't be influenced by lies from a union. But I think that's what to watch for, because I know tensions will be incredibly high and emotions will be very high, and people are being manipulated to have their emotions messed with.
I know, and Jefferson's giving us the high side here. But does on that issue, does the 77, does that change anything about the dynamic of the committee hearing itself? I mean, I know that there's going to be a lot of paid folks they literally get paid to go in and do this, and so they're going to have to go and earn their paycheck. But just in general, I mean, the fact is, if it's cooked, if they already have a majority to support the bill, does that change anything about the dynamics of the committee hearing?
They're going to go harder. I almost would have held on to the numbers and kept a tight vest, kept them in my pockets, because they're going to go harder now against the passage of the bill.
Yeah, and to that point, I think it also kind of disincentivizes picking up more people because in fact, the further it gets from 76, you're going to start seeing the marginal utility of me. Let's say I'm a Democrat, but a very school choice, curious Democrat, of which there are several. The utility for them for exposing themselves in a primary for something that's already a fait accompli, the calculus is not there. So to Jason's point, I think we're baking in 77.
All right. Well, very big news, a historic day, great announcement right before this show. Hopefully we're up to 86
Let's hope so,
by tomorrow, by the time this airs. Fantastic. Jason Isaac, he is the founder, CEO of the American Energy Institute, good friend of the foundation, former employee here, ran our Life Powered, former four-time legislator in the Texas House. Jason, thank you so much for being here.
Keep living the high carbon lifestyle. Thanks for having me.
All right, and thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. And as we always like to say at the end of our show, in the immortal words of Sam Houston, do good and risk the consequences. We'll see you next time.